This actually happened a week ago on Halloween night. I was at a house party with my friend Isabel. It was raining heavily that night and we had been drinking, so we ordered an Uber to drive us home. As soon as we got into the car, I noticed the driver was a bit too friendly. He introduced himself as Mike and started making casual conversation. At first, it was just small talk about the party and the weather, but then he began making flirty comments. Isabel and I exchanged uneasy glances but tried to brush it off, thinking we'd be home soon enough. As we drove, Mike's comments became more personal and inappropriate. He asked me if I had a boyfriend, and then said that he wouldn't let me go out wearing such a costume if he was my boyfriend. For context, I was dressed as Barbie. He kept glancing at us in the rearview mirror with a look that made me increasingly uncomfortable. I texted Isabel saying that this guy was really creepy, but she just brushed it off, saying that he's probably just bad at picking up girls. Soon after we arrived at her house, I gave her a quick hug and watched her go inside. As we drove toward my house, the car was eerily quiet. I kept my phone in my hand, ready to call someone if things escalated. He tried making some more small talk, but I answered most of his questions with yes or no. When we arrived at my house, I quickly got out, not even bothering to say goodbye. My parents were on vacation, so I was alone. I hurried inside, locking the door behind me. Peeking through the window, I saw that Mike's car was still parked outside. My heart started racing. I checked again a few minutes later. He was still there. I texted Isabel, telling her what was happening. She told me that I was overreacting, and he was probably waiting to get another pickup. An hour passed, and Mike's car hadn't moved. I couldn't understand why he was waiting outside. It was around 2 a.m. at that time, and I started getting really uncomfortable. The rain was pouring hard when I suddenly heard a knock on the door. I froze, and my heart was pounding. I waited quietly for a few seconds, hoping whoever it was would go away. Then there was another knock, and someone called out,
"Hey, it's Mike, your Uber driver. You left your jacket in my car."
I stayed quiet, thinking to myself that that was impossible because I didn't have a jacket with me in the car. He stopped knocking, and I finally decided to call the police. I explained the situation, and the dispatcher said they'd send a car out ASAP. As I waited, I heard a loud thump at my back door. I started getting even more anxious and felt like I couldn't catch my breath. I tried not to make any sounds and hoped the police would arrive quickly. A few moments later, I saw Mike getting back in his car, but he didn't drive off and continued lingering outside my house. After what felt like an eternity, I saw the flashing lights of a police car pull up. 2 officers approached Mike's car while I watched from the window. There was a brief exchange of words, and then one of the officers came to my door to ensure I was okay and to take a statement. I told them that he knocked on my door and that he was doing something at the back door as well. They said that when they questioned him, he told them that he was waiting for another pickup order and didn't want to drive around wasting gas. He denied having knocked on my door. They said that they couldn't arrest him, as there was no evidence of wrongdoing, so he just drove off. They said they'd keep a patrol car close by in case he tried anything. After the police left, I double-checked all the locks in the house and tried to calm down. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched and the fear that he might come back. I texted Isabel to let her know what happened and that I was safe, and she offered to come over, but I didn't want her going out again on such a stormy night. I hardly slept that night, jumping at every sound. The next day, I contacted Uber to report the incident. They were apologetic and promised to investigate. My parents cut their vacation short and came home after I told them what had happened. I don't know what his plan was had I opened the door and fallen for his lie, but I'm sure glad that I didn't. I still haven't received a response from Uber, but I definitely hope that they ban him from the service. After graduating high school, I worked as a pizza delivery driver in a small town. It was my first serious job, and I enjoyed it for the most part. One rainy night, close to midnight, I got an order for a delivery to a remote area on the outskirts of town. It was my last delivery of the night, and the rain was pouring down heavily, making it hard to see the road. I picked up the pizza from the restaurant and started making my way to the address. I hadn't made any deliveries to that part of town before, so I didn't know the area well. After wandering around in the rain for a while, I found the address. It was an old house at the end of a long, winding driveway surrounded by tall trees. The house looked abandoned. The paint was peeling, and the front yard was overgrown. I thought maybe I had the wrong address, but double-checked the order, and it was correct. I got out of the car with the pizza and walked up to the front door. As I approached, I noticed that one of the windows was broken. The place gave off a creepy vibe, but I figured maybe the house was being renovated. I knocked a few times, but there was no answer. I was just about to leave when the door slowly creaked open. A man stood in the doorway. He looked to be in his 50s with scuffed-up clothes and a long beard.
Hi there, sorry to keep you waiting.
He said. "No problem, here is your order," I replied, handing the boxed pizza over to him. He looked down at my hands but didn't take the box from me and just stood there for a few seconds. I felt a bit awkward and asked if there was a problem. He smiled and said,
Do you mind putting it on the living room table inside? My hands are dirty and I don't want to touch it.
I looked behind him, but there were no lights on in the house. It seemed like there was no power at all. There was a dim light coming from what I assumed was the living room where he wanted me to leave the pizza. I didn't feel comfortable going inside, but I also didn't want to be rude. It felt a bit strange that he didn't want to touch the box. It's not like he would be dirtying the pizza inside anyway. Feeling a mix of unease and obligation, I hesitantly stepped into the house. The man led the way to the living room, which was lit by a single flickering candle. I placed the pizza on an old, dust-covered table.
Just there is fine, thank you.
The man said, as he reached into his pocket and took out a big wad of cash. He paid me for the pizza and then gave me a single $100 bill as a tip.
For your trouble.
He said with an odd-looking smile on his face. I thanked him, and as I turned to leave, he spoke up again.
Do you mind giving me a hand with something down in the basement? It would only take a moment.
He said while pointing to the opened basement door. I glanced over, but it was pitch black, and I didn't feel comfortable going down there at all, despite the big tip he gave me. Sorry, but I really must get going. Thank you once again for the generous tip, I replied, while making my way back toward the front door. Suddenly, I heard footsteps coming from inside the basement. Someone else was in there and was now coming up the stairs. As I looked at the dark, open basement door, a figure of another man appeared, with what looked like a small axe in his hand. I panicked and started sprinting outside toward my car. I heard someone yelling for me to stop, but without turning around, I got into my car and drove off out of there. As I drove away, my heart was racing and my hands were shaking. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see someone chasing after me, but there was only darkness and the pouring rain. I didn't slow down until I was well away from that house and back on the main road. When I got back to the pizza place, I told my boss about the delivery. He was concerned and suggested we call the police to check it out, just to be safe. I agreed, feeling it was the right thing to do. The police went to the house later that night. They found it empty, with no sign of the two men or any foul play. They did find the pizza, still on the table, untouched. They told us that the house had been abandoned for years, and no one should have been there. In hindsight, I should have never entered the house. I'm just glad that I got away unharmed, as the night could have turned out a lot worse for me. A few years back, I landed a job as a night shift attendant at a small motel off the main highway. The job was simple and quiet, perfect for someone like myself who enjoyed solitude. My shifts were from 10 till 6, and most nights were pretty quiet. The motel was usually half empty, mostly visited by truckers or tired travelers looking for a quick rest. That night, the rain seemed to have deterred most travelers. It was around 2 hours into my shift, and I was preparing for a long, uneventful night when a car pulled into the parking lot. The car looked expensive and seemed out of place in the modest setting of our motel. A well-dressed man stepped out, his coat pulled tightly around him against the pouring rain. He hurried into the lobby, shaking off the cold. His demeanor was rushed, and he seemed anxious. He requested a room for the night, no specifics, just something quick. I assigned him a room and handed over the registration form for him to fill out. As he filled it out, I noticed his hands were shaking. He caught me looking and forced a smile, but his eyes were wary, almost scared. I handed over the key to his room and wished him a good evening. About an hour passed, and I saw someone outside in the rain, checking out the expensive car in the parking lot. A few minutes later, a tall man entered the lobby, soaking wet. He came up to the counter and, without any pleasantries, asked if a man had checked in recently. His tone was gruff and demanding. Something about his demeanor set off alarm bells in my head. I decided to play it safe and told him I couldn't give out information about our guests. He scowled, muttered something under his breath, and left, but not before giving the car outside another long, hard look. I'm not sure where he came from, but he didn't have a vehicle and just walked off out in the rain. After he left, a sense of unease settled over me. His interest in the well-dressed guest and the expensive car had raised too many questions. I decided to check on the guest for peace of mind. Leaving the front desk, I made my way to his room. I knocked on his door but received no response. I called out, but again, nothing. With growing concern, I used my master key to unlock the door to see if he was all right. The room was dark, so I flicked on the light switch. It appeared barely touched. The bed was still made, and there were no signs of the guest's belongings. The window was open, letting in the rain, creating a puddle on the floor. It looked as if the guest had left in a hurry, but why? And more importantly, where had he gone? I hurried back to the lobby, my mind racing with possibilities. Had he been scared off by the tall man? Was he in some kind of trouble? I checked the parking lot and saw that his car was still there. If he had left, he hadn't taken his car. Feeling it was my responsibility, I called the police. They arrived quickly despite the storm, and I explained everything, from the guest's anxious arrival to the encounter with the tall man and the guest's subsequent disappearance. The police took my statement and began their investigation. They searched the surrounding area but found no trace of the missing guest. His car was searched and revealed nothing out of the ordinary, just the usual travel items one would expect. In the days that followed, the police returned with more questions, but there were no answers. The guest had vanished, leaving behind only questions and his abandoned car. His identity, too, was a mystery. The information he provided at check-in led nowhere, and the car was apparently a rental. The local newspapers picked up the story, casting a spotlight on our small motel and the mysterious disappearance. People came up with various theories. Some believed he was running from someone or something. Others speculated he might have been involved in illegal activities. But without concrete evidence, these theories remained just that, speculation. A few months went by, but I didn't hear anything else about the case. I don't know if they found the guest or the man that was looking for him. I soon quit my job at the motel, so his disappearance remained a mystery to me till this day.